Welcome aboard. It is episode 96 of the J.R. Hef Show. It's election season, and so it's very important that we talk to the people who are running for office. All 100 seats of the House of Delegates are up for election, and in this era of sound bites, it's so hard to really get and have a good conversation with someone who's running for the House. I mean, you might be able to go to a dinner or something and have a chance to talk to them for 5 minutes or so, but we're really lucky today to sit and have an honest, long, half-hour conversation with an individual who's running for the House of Delegates. Russ Harper in the 94th District in Newport News is challenging Democratic incumbent Shelly Simonds for this seat. And he really goes into the issues that are facing Virginians today, the things that they're concerned about, things like education and school choice, right to life, constitutional freedoms, the economy and COVID, small businesses, protecting the community and public safety, and whether or not the police should be defunded. We cover the whole variety of that, but we also learn about Russ himself and why he's running for the House of Delegates. The fact that, again, he's just one of our neighbors who's out there, who is putting himself out there to talk about the issues that are of importance to us here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So again, really appreciate Russ's time, and I think you're going to enjoy this really forthright conversation with Russ Harper. Let's get underway. Hey, Russ Harper, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you on the show. I know the issues are important to people across the Commonwealth of Virginia. You're a first-time candidate running, and so getting your perspective, I think, is going to be interesting, particularly when all 100 seats for the House of Delegates are up this election. So let's get right to it. Russ, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I'm a 13-year Army veteran, and so the military dropped us off here around 2004. I'm married to my wife, Safi, of 21 years, and I have 5 daughters. That's always a stickler for a lot of people. 3 of them are in college, still have 2 at home. We've homeschooled all our kids, and I got out of the military, went to college, Regent University, got my bachelor's and my master's in practical theology. Then I planted a church about 4 years ago. On top of all that, I run a small business, which is a paint and drywall company here in Newport News. And so got a lot going on, to say the least.
Yeah, to say the least. There's some interesting life decisions there that I'd like to explore a little bit more. So 5 kids. You don't seem that old.
Yeah,
you got a lot of kids. I'm the youngest of 6.
See that right there, yeah. Well, the hair keeps receding. That's part of the 5 kids. But no, I got married. We got married when I was 22, and had a child just about real quick as soon as we got married, and then we had twins 2 years after that. So that kind of, we were back in the day when, they're 20 years old now. So back then we didn't have all the technology we had. So it was kind of came as a shock to us. And so we waited about 9 years to have another child. And then we had 2 more 2 years apart then. And so, we were early starters.
Well, big families are awesome. Like I said, yeah. I'm the youngest of 6. And ironically, my father was a pastor too. So
wow.
there might be something to that. So talk about the call. I mean, you were in the Army for 13 years.
Yeah.
And then I'm presuming shortly thereafter, you said you went to the college and then you planted a church about 4 years ago. Was the ministry always a driving force for you?
It was like, I grew up in the church. I know people hear that a lot of times, but I grew up in the church, and it was always, I was called to preach when I was 14. And so it was one of those callings that I kind of ran from for a long time. And then when it came time, after I got my life right with the Lord in 2005 and 2008, I had the opportunity to either re-enlist or get out. And I just really felt the Lord telling me it was time for me to move on. And so I got out. And got a job as a worship leader for a church, and that helped me propel me into going back, getting my education, and planting a church.
That's fantastic. Let's talk about your family life going through this as well. How supportive was your wife? I mean, obviously she was, but what was that like to you to have her by your side as you were going through this process?
It was one of those things where everybody around you tells you that you're crazy, you're nuts, just stay in 7 more years and you can retire and all those things. But as me and my wife just prayed about it, and I'll tell you, my wife is my biggest fan. She's my best friend. And she has always been there for me, even through the dumb decisions that I've made over the years. She's always been there to support me, to help me, shoulder to cry on. And, so she was very supportive. She knew it was the right thing to do, even though it didn't really make sense. But oftentimes, God will send you into things that don't make sense. But, when you look back, it was totally the right thing to do. And God has blessed us being obedient in that.
So parallel tracking here as well. You start a business, drywall and painting. Why the need for a separate business career path?
So after I got out, I got that job as a worship leader. I was there for 7 years, and if you know anything about church and doing worship leading or pastoring, again, there comes a place where it's just time to move on. And so as we moved on, but I didn't really have nothing to move on to. So a friend of mine who was in the church with me was painting for another guy. I said, "Hey, do you paint?" I said, "Well, I mean, I've dabbled, So he hired me. So I had a job and started working for this guy painting. Worked a couple of years. He ended up retiring, and I thought, you know what, I can do this. And so in 2013, I just created the name and started a business. And thank God for YouTube.
YouTube has been fantastic. I can't tell you the number of times I've actually turned to it myself for some advice and things of that nature. But, one of the things that I have found percolating up over the last couple of years is the renewed appreciation and importance of the skills trades. So talk about you're going through in terms of apprenticeship and developing your trade and eventually, running your own business.
Yeah. So like I said, when I started with him, I mean, I knew how to pick up a brush and maybe, and a roller. The cool thing was these were older gentlemen in their 60s and 70s, and they were phenomenal painters. And just like I've done my whole life, I just started asking questions. How'd you do that? I wanted to learn, and anything I do or put my hands to, I want to be excellent at it. It's not, I don't want to do it halfway or just kind of just get a paycheck. I wanted to learn. And so these guys were willing to teach me everything they knew. And so as I went through with them for 2 years, and even after that, I would still call them and say, "Hey, I got this thing I've run into, what would you do about that?" And they've helped me. They came out and walked me through stuff. And so as I progressed, I got better and better, but it was because of the older gentlemen that hired me and gave me that opportunity. And they basically taught me everything they knew.
So the reason we're going into this conversation is because obviously all of these things in your background build up to the decision for you running for House of Delegates. They kind of formulate your calculus as you make this decision because, again, one would think, all right, you're a pastor, you've got a plant church, it's growing, it's doing well. You've got a business in the community, it's growing, it's doing well. You've got a family that's large that you've nourished and
right.
So life's good, right? Or at least you've got a lot of irons in the fire. Why the House of Delegates? Why now? Why against Shelly Simonds?
Well, 2 years ago. And so as a pastor, let me back up a little bit. As a pastor, I have always been one to involve faith in politics. I think it's important, not necessarily telling people who to vote for or what like that, but showing people what's really happening in our world and helping them understand that you can't separate the two. If you're a Christian and you are trying to, walk this life out like Christ tells us to and be obedient, you have to involve yourself, be aware of what's going on. So I've always preached those things. And a friend of mine about 2 years ago had just asked me like, "Hey man, would you ever thought about running?" And I was like, "No way, not going to do it." And then in November, this last election, I preached a sermon. I'm basically laying out the two platforms and showing people, the Democrat versus Republican, and showing them what's really there. And it was everybody said it was a powerful sermon, and a lot of people's eyes were open that didn't pay attention. So kind of my points were platform over personalities, look at record over rhetoric, and vote truth over tradition. And so after that, I really felt the Lord calling me. And then oddly enough, the same guy talks to me in January of this year and says, "Hey man, you really need to run this year." And so me and my wife prayed about it and felt like it was the time to do it. And I always joke and I tell people, one of the biggest decisions was I just got tired of yelling at my TV. So
Oh, I can hear that. That's loud and clear, and you have all my respect in the world jumping into the arena and doing this. I know the amount of legwork literally that goes into running for House of Delegates. It's not all mass media, right? So Shelly Simonds does have the opportunity to run targeted commercials. I know this because I live in her district and I've gotten one of those targeted commercials. So she's got the money to do that. But for you probably need to really get down to the grassroots and get door to door. And we'll get into the issues here in a second, but talk about forming your campaign, talk about reaching out in the community and really getting to know folks of your district. How has that gone over since January, and we're here into October and into early voting?
It's gone well. I mean, like you said, we're totally grassroots. My wife is my campaign manager. I have a campaign strategist. It's another friend of ours that goes from another church. And basically, we just began to talk with others, and people believed that God had called me into this and believed that this was the right thing to do, and they jumped on board. And we actually have had a pretty good base of steady volunteers. And but you're right, it's grassroots. We don't have the money that incumbents have, or even the Democrats have. It's really grassroots. It's door to door. But what's been good about it is as we're going door to door, we're getting to meet people again. We're getting to talk to people again. We're getting to see what they're concerned about and what's really important, and understanding, getting back to the truth that we serve the people. It's not the other way around. And so it's been really good to get to know our neighbors. We get some doors slammed in our face. We get some people that cuss us out, but all in all, it's actually a really good reception. And a lot of people are just saying, "Oh, wow, I didn't even know we had a choice this year. So yeah, I'm going to vote for you." Just really kind of been eye-opening for us, but it's, we're winning it one door at a time, changing one mind at a time. That's how we've been working it.
Well, that's so important for people to have a choice. And I definitely appreciate the fact that since I live in your district, that I do have a choice on this election cycle. So the question again, though, that I have is, have you run a traditional campaign? I think a lot of folks would say, okay, you're a Republican, you want to shore up your base. So you're going to go into traditionally Republican areas and try to drive up the vote count as much as you possibly can. How have you thought about approaching your campaign?
We've actually approached it the opposite way, meaning we know where the heavy Republican sections are, and we haven't spent a lot of time there yet. And the reason why is because we know that those areas, those precincts, always vote. They all, no matter what, no matter if there's an election cycle, which in Virginia there's a cycle every year. We never have an off year, so you're always going to be voting for something. They always go vote, and so it's what we try to do is make sure they get out to vote. But what we've actually been doing is working in the heavily populated Democrat areas, or what they call in the soft Democrat areas and the independent areas. And believe it or not, we're getting at least one sign on every street in Democrat elected areas, because we're realizing that, we don't go in as, "Hey, I'm a Republican running." We go in and say, "Hey, we get to know them. We try to talk about the issues, and then we tell them, here's where we stand. Here's what we're trying to do, to help your community and our community and the people of Newport News in the 94th district." And getting a lot of good reception. So we kind of done it the opposite. We're not trying to, and we're not spending a lot of time pushing out Republicans, because we know that they're going to go vote. We just, here in the next week or so, we'll make sure that they do go vote. But we've actually been really trying to hit the other areas. And one of the things that's happened is a lot of the areas we go to, they say, "You're the first person that's ever come here. Nobody ever comes here. Nobody ever talks to us." Yet many of them still go vote, but they're like, nobody ever talks to us. And so we gain votes just because we showed up and talked to them.
Let's talk about some of those issues that you're talking about. I think one of the ones that's, it doesn't matter who's running for House delegates, or if you're running for governor or lieutenant governor or attorney general, it's the topic du jour. It's education. It's definitely talking about the issues now. Governor McAuliffe, during his debate, made a little bit of a gaffe, saying that parents should not be involved in their education. I have a little bit of a take on that, but I'd like to hear yours. What do you think about parental involvement in an individual child's education?
I mean, I think it's of utmost importance. I mean, like I said, as a Christian and a minister, I mean, we go back to the Word of God that talks about our children are their inheritance, their heritage. You know, it's our job to train them up. It's our job to teach them. And we as parents, you know, really have forgotten that. Kind of what this has done is brought things back into the light, and it's actually been a good thing because it's brought parents back into the lives of their children, realizing what their children were learning, or should I say not learning, especially in Newport News public school systems. And so education has always been a parental right. It's the job of the parent to educate. Unfortunately, many parents, some because they want to, others because of necessity with two-income households or single parents, you know, have given the public school the complete rights to raise their children. And now they're seeing the products of that for some who are older, and they're seeing what's happening even in kindergartens now and the things they're being taught. And it's opened a lot of parents' eyes, and a lot of parents are getting back to the truth that, you know, these are my children. It's my responsibility to ensure that they are learning what they're supposed to be learning.
I think the COVID-19 environment sort of instigated a little bit of that too. Sure. Over the last year. You know, parents have had to try to figure out, using technology, how to get their kids educated. And some parents, you know, maybe didn't have the luxury of what you and I are communicating on right now. And so not only was that a hurdle to overcome, but as you said, they started seeing firsthand what their kids were being taught, exactly. and it perhaps opened up their eyes a little bit. So yeah, I'm with you on the fact that a parent should actively be involved in their education, in their child's education. I know I was with our child. I know you are with your kids. The question that I do have is, I'm not sure that Governor McAuliffe was being nuanced enough. Do you think that there's a role, though, for professional educators to, you know, try to determine what a good curriculum is?
Well, I mean, I think that is their job. That's what they get paid to do. We have to be careful, you know, in navigating this when we want to give rights back to the parents. True, but we also don't want to destroy our system or destroy the public school system or the charter school system, or, you know, these educators have a responsibility to educate, though. And what we're seeing is ideologies and indoctrinations, if you will, kind of filtering that education. And so that's kind of the issue. But yes, I do think it's educators have a responsibility. I think what we're seeing, though, is they are failing in that responsibility simply because we've allowed these ideologies and things to creep into the school systems.
So what kind of ideologies or indoctrinations are you referring to? What are the ones that perhaps annoy you the most?
I think, you know, everybody's big on, you know, critical race theory now, but the truth is that's been flowing through our educational system for decades now. It's actually not a new thing. It came out of colleges, academia, and has flowed into our school system. But it is a big deal. It is an issue. But a couple other things that people don't think about or don't see. We're talking about sex education for kindergartners. We're talking about one of the big things for the school system in Newport News was this transgender model policy. It wasn't that people were upset that transgenders people had rights and shouldn't be bullied and things like that. It was people were upset that this policy went really further into the weeds and and could eventually harm parents, could have kids taken away from their parents because they disagree with a kid's gender choice. It could have teachers lose their jobs. I mean, there's just a lot of things. And that's one of the biggest things that people are really upset about, and rightly so. And that's why when I mean ideologies, I mean those types of things. It's those things where we're putting more effort into critical race theory and black versus white, and putting more effort into transgender and LGBTQ than we are just simply teaching them math and science and history and civics. and the things that we should be learning. That's what I mean when I say indoctrination. They're being indoctrinated into an ideology, which is not education.
Russ, before we move on from education, something that I've always been interested in is school choice. I saw how effective it's been in Wisconsin. I know Governor Tommy Thompson up there implemented it. And I actually had a good podcast a while back with a school choice advocate. Do you think school choice is something that's important here in the Commonwealth of Virginia?
Yes, I do. Definitely do. Especially, like I said, in the 94th District of Newport News, last year, our scores were the lowest scores on the peninsula, which just kind of the coronavirus has kind of brought those things out. It's been happening for a long time. We went from 71% math scores to 38%, 69% science scores to 38%. And so these things are important. School choice can help that. School choice will one, it creates competition, and competition makes everybody better. So we can do that through voucher systems, through taxes, and we can also allow more charter schools. As we look at North Carolina has 140 something charter schools. Charter schools are also important. So between school choice and charter schools, we can allow the parents to basically send their kids to a school that will receive the best education possible and not be forced to go to a failing school simply because of where they live. So yeah, we've been fighting for that. Your
opponent has made a big stink about raising teacher pay. It's one of the things that's on her platform is trying to be appealing to individuals. Do you think school choice is threatening to teachers? Would they rather go with someone who's going to raise their pay, or do they think school choice might be something that's a viable option?
I think it's a viable option, simply like what I said earlier. I think school choice creates competition. When you create competition, you're forced to be better, to get better, or you lose. So when you create that competition, that means the teacher's pay is going to go up because we're going to be searching for the best and the brightest, and teachers will have more opportunities and they will get paid more simply because there's more choices.
House of Delegates primarily deals with budgets. That's its biggest thing. And, I think a lot of times when we think education, we're thinking, okay, that's a school board issue. Where in the House of Delegates would you try to influence or ensure that some of these principles that you're talking about are not in the school system?
Yeah, I think we have to go back and as we put forth laws and things like has done, that those were put forth and required the Department of Education to create something. So the Department of Education did what they were required to do, was create something. And so we have to go back and ensure that we're not creating ideologies, ensure that we're creating curriculum that truly teaches true American history and truly teaches math and science without the ideologies. And so that's something that the House of Delegates has done, and that's something that they can do. We have to get back to just basic schooling and not putting our ideologies forth in the lawmaking.
So it should come as no surprise to anyone, particularly with you being a pastor, that you are, I don't know, sometimes there are some interesting pastors out there who take a contrarian view on this, but you favor life, right? Right to life is a big part of your campaign, and you're unabashedly so, and in my opinion, as a person of faith, rightfully so. But how... I think maybe we can see it in Texas with their law, but what kind of laws would you be proposing to promote life here in the Commonwealth of Virginia?
Yeah, so I always tell people, and everybody wants to say, you're against abortion. I said, well, I mean, of course I am, but I like to say I'm for life. We always want to say what we're against, but I'm for life. It's been something that's just I've fought for a long time. And what I want to do in the House of Delegates is a couple of things. One thing I want to do is I call it the Fairness and Funding Act. Virginia gave over $6 million taxpayer dollars to Planned Parenthood last year, $6 million. And so the Fairness and Funding Act would simply say that if we're going to do that, that's fine. Then we must give that same amount of money to crisis pregnancy centers and adoption centers and allow these women to have, they already have viable options and choices. But one of the issues is those viable options and choices is often privately funded. It's not government funded. And the money that Planned Parenthood gets is there's no strings attached to that. It's money. And I want to do the same thing for the crisis pregnancy centers, because what I've found is that most women, not all, but most who go into an abortion clinic are there not because they want to kill their baby. They're there because they see no other option. They see no other way out. And a lot of times they're pushed into making that decision. And so I think if we have those options and those options are funded and promoted, we'll see a huge reduction in abortion. Roe versus Wade is the law of the land. Things are coming in the court. We may overturn it, we may not, but I think we can effectively overturn it, even if we never legislatively overturn it, by doing that. The second thing I want to do is to the Democrats they came and repealed the law that said women must wait 24 hours before making the decision and must be given an opportunity to see and hear the baby before making the decision. They repealed that law because it's not really about women's rights or health for them. It's about abortion. I want to reinstate that law, because when we had that law in Virginia, we saw a 40% reduction in abortions here in Virginia. And women who see and hear their baby, the stats are that 80% of those women who get an opportunity to see and hear their baby decide they choose life and not abortion. So those are simple steps that we can take. We can fund the options and promote the other options, because that's one of the issues. And we can put those laws back in place that reduced abortion.
Absolutely. And Democrats used to believe in safe, rare, and legal, but evidently that
right.
ideology seems to have gone by the wayside. Let's talk about election integrity, because to me, this is something that's so simple. You need an ID in order to go and borrow a library book, for crying out loud. I don't understand where the problem is here, but why don't you expand on your ideas regarding election integrity?
Yeah, it's real simple, right? One person equals one vote. We made it complicated, and we've added all these things to it. We got the mail-in voting now, and we got the early voting. So now we have election season instead of just an election day. All those things open up doors for there to be fraud. Now, we can argue whether there was actual real fraud or a huge amount of fraud or that. But the problem is we have now opened the door for there to be more fraud. So election integrity is just simply protecting the integrity of the election, meaning one person equals one vote, meaning, yes, you should have an ID to vote. Yes, that is a responsibility of all Americans. And we did a small survey with many African Americans, and 100% of them said, I already have an ID. It's not a big deal. I don't know what they're talking about. So it's just a talking point for the Democrats. It's a way for them to, I won't say steal, but influence an election by saying that you don't need these things. And so if you don't need an ID, then that opens door for fraud. And so it's simple. Like you said, you want to buy alcohol, you want to buy cigarettes, you want to go to the doctors, you want to go to the pharmacy, you want to go to the library, all this requires an ID. You want to rent a car, requires an ID. So there's no reason why anybody shouldn't have an ID, and most already have an ID.
Absolutely. Here in the city of Newport News, it is a city. It's an urban environment. It's got its issues, to say the least, from time to time. And so law enforcement is something of a concern. Talk to me about protecting the police and about ensuring that we continue to have we look up to our law enforcement.
Right.
The big defund the police thing has gone about. What have you been hearing from your conversations with voters?
Yeah, that's number 2 on the list for many of them is public safety. A lot of them are concerned about their safety, and again, it goes back to this idea that we've created that says that policing is racist, and most police are racist. But if you go down to these places where the crime is heavy, they want the police there. They're asking for the police there. So again, it's a false narrative that's being played out through the Democrat Party, where they have sought to pass bills that would make it not a felony to assault a police officer. They're trying to remove qualified immunity, which simply means that if they do that, a police officer could be sued and lose his job and everything for a simple traffic stop. All these things they're trying to do. But the irony is that, you have security at the Capitol. You have, police with people with guns that walk around and protect all the people at the Capitol. So it's It's just a bad situation, but we don't need to defund them. We need to make sure that they're fully funded, make sure they're fully supported and fully protected under the laws that we have in Virginia. And because we see crime rising simply because of this defund and hate the police thought process that's been going on. It's a dangerous thing, and many people are really concerned about their safety.
Absolutely. Well, and rightfully so. And of course, I think rightfully so, based upon the things that we've seen. George Floyd obviously comes to mind immediately. That some, improving training. I don't know, maybe improving training, possibly. It has to be part of it. I mean, people. I would say, if I were an African American, I would potentially be concerned for my interactions with police officer regarding what may or may not happen. But I would also say, based upon your conversations and what you know, that's a sub thought. That is not a forethought. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, again, improving training and just getting people to talk to one another, having more police on the streets and having them have a better presence and, getting used to them, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, and I think we give kudos to where kudos is due. The Chief Drew, the Newport News Police Department, actually do a really good job of that. They have community outreaches almost every week in different areas of Newport News, and they are have been known to be proactive instead of reactive. And so we don't see a lot of those issues here in Newport News, but when you bring those false narratives in, and people in the world we live in, it's you read a quote on Facebook and you just believe it. And so there are people who believe it. But like you said, it's Chief Drew is totally aware that they need some reforms in the sense of better training and things like that. And he's already working on it. They're already doing it. So when we go in there and try to create laws, and push them down, a lot of, especially Newport News, they're already doing these things. And so the laws come from a false ideology and a false narrative of defund the police, get rid of racism and all these things, tear down the oppressor and this stuff. But like I said, Newport News actually does a pretty good job of it. And most people are concerned that if we do defund the police, if we go through with this, that their neighborhoods and their lives could be threatened on a daily basis.
Talk finally about constitutional freedoms. I know that's an important issue to you. Again, how does the House of Delegates act as a backstop for our constitutional freedoms?
Well, I mean, that's what I tell everybody. As I'm going around talking to people, there are many people who don't even know what a delegate is or what a delegate does. And I basically just say, we're the Congress of Virginia. We write the laws of Virginia. They go to the Virginia Senate. They either say yes or kick it back and say change this, and eventually ends up on the governor's desk. He signs it or vetoes it. And so we have the authority to make these changes, and that's what's so dangerous about just electing anybody. Because people will go up there and make changes that aren't beneficial for all Virginians and beneficial for people in their district. And so when we talk about constitutional freedoms, it got kicked back by one vote in the Senate that it would have made you a criminal overnight if you had a magazine that was over 10 rounds. I mean, simple things like that would have happened. Like I said, it was defeated by one vote. If that person would have said yes, you would have been a criminal overnight and had to get rid of something simple as a 12-round magazine. That's the danger of just electing anybody and having people go up there. And so we talk about constitutional freedoms, First Amendment, Second Amendment, all these things. Those things can be lost overnight because of who we elect and who we vote for and send them to there, because they have the power to create these laws and send these laws through. And if you have, a one-sided system, which we currently have, it can be very dangerous because they will be able to push through any laws they want. And if we're not careful, we'll lose all our constitutional freedoms simply because we either don't vote or we don't care who we vote for. One of the things I really care about is getting back to civil discourse. We're so divided now, down the line, 50-50, I hate you, you hate me, you're a Democrat, I'll never listen to you, you're a Republican, I'll never listen to you. But we have to get back to civil discourse, reaching across the aisles and saying, look, we may disagree on just about everything, but here's two things we can agree on. Let's get that done for the people of Virginia and the people of the 94th District. And so that's one of the things I'm really excited about trying to put back together, because absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? If you have one party in complete power, it's going to be corrupt. That's just human nature.
So this podcast is going to run October 19th. We'll have a couple weeks left before the election. What's your closing arguments? What do you want the people of the 94th? And you're kind of representing everybody running for House of Delegates, at least on my show, because this will go out across all Virginia. What's the closing argument these last couple weeks?
The closing argument is just simply this. I'm a regular guy, just like you and anybody else. I worked hard for everything I have. Nothing was given to me. And I started my business here in Newport News. I planted a church here in Newport News. My kids have grown up here in Newport News. I'm deeply invested into my city and into the 94th district. It's who I am. And I'm just like you. I feel the same struggles, when it comes to small business and fighting these regulations and taxes that are kind of burdening and weighing us down. I feel the pain from what the pandemic has done. I feel the pain emotionally from as a pastor being able to counsel people, through these things. And so I understand exactly where everybody is and what you're going through because I'm one of you. I'm not going there to be a politician. I have no desire to become a career politician. I'm going there to offer ideas and put forth some legislation that I believe would benefit each and every one of us, from school choice to right to life legislation. I believe in these things that we can do. They're simple things, but it can benefit all of us. And that's the important thing. They're not just one party or another or the rich or the poor. These things that we want to do will benefit all of us and make all of our lives better and make Virginia a better place to live, work, and raise a family.
Russ, it's been fantastic talking to you today. Thank you so much for this opportunity. How can folks find out more about you or your campaign?
They can simply go to russfordelegate.com. There it has all the information about my campaign, the things that I'm running on, things I'm fighting for. There's also, an area where you can donate. On this last leg, we're simply just trying to put forth some targeted ads, videos, but that costs a lot of money. And so we definitely need some help there. We are, like I said, we're grassroots campaign. It's $1, $5, $10 donations that we're getting, but all in all, God's blessed us. We believe God's hand is in this, regardless of the outcome on November 2nd. We look at what the Lord is doing and how He's kind of blessed the campaign and blessed us as we're doing it. He's opened our eyes to some things that we'd have never seen if we hadn't jumped into it. So go to russfordelegate.com. You can get some information there, and you can join in the fight. We appreciate it.
Russ Harper, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you.